me about the last time that you failed.
Oh, I actually just got back from failing the stats exam.
We created a presentation that ultimately we didn't get to present, and that was a failure on our part.
Last semester, I trained and wanted to run a half marathon, but wasn't able to. My shin splints were too bad.
My psychology class that I took last semester.
I failed a test last week, actually.
I got on academic probation in my freshman year.
There's too much joy in life to be fearful. Don't be scared. I want to say a word, but I can't say it. Oh, what the hell I'm gonna say? Is this video? Kick life in the ass, okay? You gotta embrace life. And I see so many people, it's like, you know, scared of something in life. I mean, why? Why? You have so many blessings. Does that make sense? Don't be scared of failure. You're gonna learn something, you're gonna hate it in a moment, but you will learn something from it, I guarantee you.
I realize that part of failure is around your expectations. The expectations you set for yourself, the expectations you set for others.
Because failure is not what it seems like on the surface. It's not necessarily the end. It's not life or death most of the time. What failure is a stepping stone. A stepping stone to the better, stronger, more powerful version of who you are.
For me, even understanding that word failure, I had to understand what success meant for me. Because failure for me will look different than failure for each one of you. And that is really critical in making sure you understand in pursuing your own journeys, that you can't look at everyone else's success and then dictate your failures based upon that. To impact rather than to impress. The thing is, you will never be able to control the outcome. You can support the outcome by being strategic in the things that you do, but ultimately, if your why is I want to make a difference, everything else will work out. And in fact, you will then become impressive. When you seek to be impactful, you ultimately will be impressive.
You define failure?
Oh gosh, okay, so I think it's different probably for every person. Some people, for failure, it's, I guess, how they think people see them if they are not successful in business or successful in, in terms of like maybe their income or their status. That might be a failure. For other people, it might be something with just being a parent and feeling like you're not doing everything you can. And so I think when you feel like you've given 100% and things didn't work out, you always hear like you have to learn from your mistakes. I think you can use failure and learn from your mistake, but if you're a type of person that just hasn't been able to see why that happened, then that failure probably can be pretty devastating.
I don't think that ultimately there is a failure as long as in the end you learn something from it. I think that is really important. But failure, I mean, it's different for every single person. I do think though that failure ultimately, by definition, is when you set your sights on something that doesn't happen. But something I always tell my children, because believe me, there have been lots of things in their lives and mine as well, but a good tip to live by is when God gives you what you want, that's his direction. When God doesn't give you what you want or it doesn't turn out that way, it's God's protection. And we kind of live our life that way. So I feel like ultimately failure should just be cut out of the definition of out of the dictionary completely. So.
I think one of my primary takeaways is the fact that failure is not linear. It's something that's very personal for everybody, and it looks different for everybody. And that also tracks with the fact that success looks different for everybody. I think it's so easy now, especially with the constant comparison that's available to everybody, to look at the person next to you and see what they have going on and saying they're so much more successful than me and I must be a failure because I'm not doing what they're doing. But I think one of my primary takeaways is, first, we don't know what the person next to us is going through. We don't know their circumstances. We don't know their failures. But at the same time, looking introspectively, I think these talks really helped me redefine failure for myself. And that's not so much that failure isn't just a setback, but failure is doing nothing to learn from a setback. I think that's how I personally define failure as when I face a setback, do I decide to learn and grow from it, or do I decide to let it define me? And I think that especially college students, especially people in our generation, it's so easy to take a formative time like this, face a setback, and let it define our path. But one thing that I really took away from these speakers was the fact that it doesn't have to define your path, and setbacks can be even better learning lessons that other people don't experience. And so instead of taking those moments as a time to take a step back, rather something new to jump over, and that'll put you higher than anybody else. To overcome failure takes a community, and that's where I'm not someone who can do it on my own, and I think that's really tough for me to think about. And I know everybody wants to think they're Superman, and it's easy to think that you are that Superman until you get a little taste of kryptonite, and I had that, but what I learned from that is it takes more than one person. It takes a group of people to really pull anybody out of it.
To maintain a healthy appetite for risk, you have to have some proclivity for it, right? You have to want to be sort of forward-leaning, and moderate that against what opportunities you see in front of you, and know that there are times when you have to really turn it up and say, I got to really go for this. It's going to be risky. There's a high risk, but a high reward. And other times you got to dial it back and say, now is not the time, right? Maybe you don't want to die on that hill. In the current situation that we were talking about before we started documenting the conversation, we talked about the Star Lab opportunity at Ohio State with the space station that's being built to replace the ISS. Huge risk. Huge risk. I mean, almost people like, who are we to think that we could be a part of something like that? And the answer is, well, is that a conversation about our own view of ourselves, or is that a conversation about the height of the hurdle? And sometimes it's both, right? You have to be able to really assess what are you capable of. And I think maybe we're some of those who appear to be have a high appetite for risk may also sometimes have a better sense of what can really be accomplished.
Probably the biggest failure that I ever experienced in my life was my journey back to Ohio State. I wanted to be a professor here at Ohio State for several years and applied multiple times, and it took 3 years and 3 no's before I finally got the yes. It took a lot of grit and perseverance to keep going. A lot of people said that it would never happen, but I just kept putting my best foot forward and finally got the job. So it was those few failures that ultimately turned into a success, and that's why I'm sitting in this room today. I think acknowledging that everybody faces failure every day, every month, every year is the first step to kind of embracing it and starting to view it as a learning opportunity. I meet with students all the time that didn't get the job or the internship they wanted, or they didn't get into the student organization that they wanted. But what they need to realize, what we all need to realize, is that opens other doors for other opportunities. And kind of that shift in mindset allows for us to pursue something that might be even better than what we initially anticipated. Failure defines our growth and ultimately catapults us to success. So now, as I'm thinking about failure, I seek it out, and I tell myself that if I'm not failing, I'm not pushing myself hard enough.
I think the first definition that comes to mind when I think of failure is just ultimately shortcoming those goals and dreams that you have, and being disappointed that in yourself that you didn't reach what you wanted to. But those failures are also a positive thing and get you to where you want to be and challenge you and make you stronger to get back up and do it again. And you may fail again, but all those failures teach you so many more things about more opportunities coming. For me, failure has definitely challenged me, and you can't just be Superwoman or Superman all the time, and you're going to struggle. So just being vulnerable is the first step in that failure and getting through that failure. And then just courage to just keep going and attacking whatever's next.
In universities, in the classroom, students and professors and so on, failure is most often talked about with respect to finals. You rarely fail a homework, but you may fail a final. My view of that whole approach, that's based on some of my own experiences, that if you've never failed, then you've never pushed yourself. You don't know what your limits are. And so you have left a whole region of your personal experience unexplored. So in that sense, I was told early on as a young student, don't let your classes get in the way of your education. That you're going to learn a lot more outside the classes, and the more you integrate that external experience with what you're doing in the classroom, the more you might come to understand that statement about a 4.0 is a statement of not having tried hard enough. Again, this is not to criticize those who have their 4.0s. It's an encouragement for them to look beyond that. In business, and particularly in startup businesses, there's a saying that fail early so that you can rebuild and start again, and learn from that failure so that you are perhaps better prepared the next time around.
You approach the challenge as like you're taking risks.
Uh-huh.
Every single
Yeah.
day you have to prove yourself.
I remember freshman year, it's like one of my first summer workouts, and I walk out there, and it's Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison, Emeka, JSN, just dogs. And I'm coming out there as like a scrawny freshman, how will I contribute here? How will I be of value here? And you don't really see that very often as a freshman. You don't feel valuable as much because you're not doing as much. And then I just remember Coach Hart saying, be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that kind of carried some weight with me, because that's important to always go out of your comfort zone, and because you got to jump in, get reps. You got to, you got to be a dog. You got to fight to the front of that line, and that's important. And that just kind of stuck with me and helped me, figure out how to bring value.
If you had to define failure, whether personally for you or just something that you've learned about, the definition of failure and how it's related in your life, what are some words that you put to that? How would you speak to that?
I would say two things. Failure is not fatal, and failure is an opportunity. What do I mean by that? Failure is not fatal. If you don't fail, you're not trying. And I think that's the biggest message to get across to kids that are in college, is that it seems to me, and what I've seen is kids in college, or especially in business, the medical field, medical school, graduate school, they seek perfection. They want to be the top of their class. They want to be the person with 4.0 and those type of things. And that stress that you put on yourself, not that that's not a good thing to want to be the best and do everything, but what's really going to happen if you don't get that A? What's going to happen? What's going to happen if you go to apply for that job and you don't get it? It's an opportunity. Because when somebody says no or you have failure, there's a yes. You just have to find it. And if you don't fail, you don't learn. So you have to take the failure as a positive. You have to take it as something that, okay, what did I do wrong? Or why did I fail? And what direction is it taking me? But you have to seek the direction, not worry about the failure.
Sometimes the most difficult things we go through, we learn the most from.
When I think about failure, I think about it as like a muscle. The first time you use it, it is confusing. It hurts a lot after you use it. The next time you use it, it hurts only a little bit, and then you do it over and over and over again. You fail over and over and over again. And in time, you recognize that while failure sometimes is still embarrassing or stressful, it's not as hard to do the reps.
When we were thinking about something to do for a project, we came up with redefining the issue of failure here specifically at Fisher and the university overall. But it's not just really redefining failure, it's more teaching people what to do in instances of shortcoming and failure as well, and how to use those instances of failure as like a learning moment and a teaching moment for yourself. Because it's not necessarily that you were underprepared in that moment. There are a lot of things that are beyond your control when it comes to failure. And it's really just understanding that and coming to terms with that that's going to help you redefine failure for your personal self and help it build your journey as it relates to failure.
I think my definition of failure is you go through it and it happens. There's so many setbacks that you face, but I think the biggest thing for especially me is it's kind of like another characteristic about you. It's not something you should even keep quiet, but maybe even rave about, just because you've like put those pieces together and that's who you are and you've learned so much from it.
I think my biggest takeaway from this whole speaker series and learning about other people's perspectives on failure is just learning that failure isn't final. It's really up to you to determine whether to use that experience as defeat or whether you'll take it as motivation to use it to grow in the future.
I think failure is a gift. It tells you when you have pushed yourself and maybe you weren't ready yet. Maybe you just did one thing wrong and you can learn from that. But failure can be a gift, and it's also the point at which you can decide, should I push through this or should I pivot? Often, you're not going to go wrong either way.
One key takeaway I had from witnessing all of these speakers was that I want to seek out different opportunities that give me the opportunity to succeed and also to fail. It made me realize that it's important to seek out things that make you more uncomfortable, not always seeking out the comfort in the world.
I think failure is inevitable, right? It's gonna happen to everybody, whether it be in your professional career, but also in your personal life. So I think really being able to run towards failure and leverage the insights you gain from failures can only help you. And especially when you're a young adult, a college student, or a young professional, being able to fail quickly is going to really benefit you in those later stages of life, because it's a lot easier to fail right now. When you fail, it's not that hard. The risks we're taking aren't as grand as they're going to be, say, when you're 30 years old. Those failures are going to have a lot more of an impact because it's most likely not going to be just you, but then also a lot more of those people who rely on you. So being able to develop those proper responses to failure and being able to embrace failures now as a younger individual can really pay off those dividends in the long run.
If nothing else you take from this is to be present and in the moment.